The Art Workshop, Part 1, A Creative Journey begins. It was a bright Saturday morning. Emma woke up early, feeling excited. Today was a special day because she was going to her first art workshop. Emma had always loved drawing and painting. She often spent her afternoons at home, coloring with pencils, markers, and paints. But today, she was going to learn more from a real art teacher. She was ready to take her love for art to the next level. Emma ate breakfast quickly, grabbed her bag, and headed to the art studio. The art studio was not far from her home, just a 10-minute walk. As she walked, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What will the teacher be like? Will I be good enough? She thought. But she reminded herself that she was there to learn and have fun. When Emma arrived at the studio, she was amazed. The room was filled with colorful paintings and sculptures. The walls were covered with art, and the smell of paint filled the air. There were big windows that let in lots of sunlight, making the whole place feel warm and welcoming. Emma saw a group of people already there. Some were around her age, while others were a bit older. They all smiled at her as she walked in. Emma found a seat near a large table where the art materials were laid out: brushes, paints, pencils, and blank canvases. "Welcome, everyone," said a kind voice. It was Mrs. Clark, the art teacher. Mrs. Clark was a friendly woman with curly hair and glasses. She was wearing a colorful apron, already covered in paint. She smiled at the group and said, "I'm so happy to see all of you here today. We are going to have fun and make some amazing art. Remember, there's no right or wrong in art. The most important thing is to express yourself." Emma felt a little more relaxed after hearing Mrs. Clark's words. She was right. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about enjoying the process that Mrs. Clark began by showing everyone how to mix colors. She took some blue and yellow paint and mixed them together to make green. Emma watched carefully and couldn't wait to try it herself. Then Mrs. Clark explained how to use the different brushes. There were big brushes for painting large areas and small brushes for details. Emma had never used so many different brushes before, and she was eager to experiment. After the short lesson, it was time for the students to start their own paintings. Mrs. Clark gave each person a blank canvas. "Today, we will paint something that makes us happy," she said. "It can be anything: a place, a person, an animal, or even a feeling. Think about what brings you joy, and then put it on the canvas." Emma thought for a moment. What makes her happy? She remembered the beautiful flowers in her grandmother's garden. Every summer, she would visit her grandmother and spend hours in the garden, smelling the roses and picking flowers. The memory always made her smile. She decided to paint a picture of that garden. She started by sketching the outline of the flowers with a pencil. Then, she picked up a brush and mixed some red and white paint to make the soft pink color of the roses. Carefully, she painted each petal, remembering the way they looked in the sunlight. As she worked, Emma felt herself getting lost in the painting. She didn't notice the time passing or the people around her. All that mattered was the canvas in front of her and the colors she was creating. It was peaceful. Around her, the other students were also busy with their own paintings. One girl was painting a picture of the beach with the ocean waves crashing on the shore. A boy next to Emma was drawing a dog running through a field. Each painting was different, but they all told a story. Mrs. Clark walked around the room, giving advice and encouragement. When she came to Emma's table, she smiled warmly. "That's beautiful, Emma," she said. "I can see the love you have for those flowers in your brush strokes. Keep going and don't be afraid to add more colors." Emma nodded, feeling proud of her work so far. She added more details, using lighter colors for the sunlight and darker colors for the shadows. The painting was starting to look just like her grandmother's garden. After a couple of hours, Mrs. Clark told everyone to take a break. Emma stood up, stretched, and walked around the room to see the other students' paintings. She was amazed at how different everyone's art was. Each painting showed something special about the person who made it. During the break, Emma made some new friends. She talked to Sarah, the girl who was painting the beach. Sarah told her how much she loved the ocean and how she visited the beach every summer with her family. Emma smiled, happy to find someone who also had a love for nature. As they talked, they shared stories about their favorite places, what they liked to paint, and their dreams for the future. Emma realized that art was not just about creating something beautiful. It was also about connecting with others and sharing a part of yourself. When the break was over, everyone went back to their paintings. Emma felt more inspired than ever. She added the finishing touches to her garden scene, painting the bright blue sky and soft white clouds. The picture now looked complete, and Emma felt a sense of pride as she looked at her work. The workshop ended with everyone showing their paintings to the group. Mrs. Clark praised each person, pointing out the unique qualities in their art. When it was Emma's turn, she nervously held up her painting of the garden. But when she saw the smiles on the faces of her new friends and heard Mrs. Clark's kind words, she knew that she had done something special. The day had been full of creativity, learning, and new friendships. Emma couldn't wait for the next art workshop. She felt like she had found a new place where she could be herself and grow as an artist. But the journey wasn't over yet. There was still more to learn, and Emma was eager for what was to come in the next session of the art workshop. The Art Workshop, Part 2, Growing as an Artist. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the art workshop. The next week felt long as she waited for Saturday to come again. She would look at her painting of the garden every day, thinking about how much she had learned in just a few hours. It wasn't just about painting, it was about seeing the world differently. Colors, shapes, and even light now had new meanings for her. Finally, Saturday arrived. Emma woke up early again, feeling the same excitement as before. She carefully packed her brushes and paints into her bag, and with a smile on her face, she walked to the art studio. The weather was warm, and the sun was shining just like the day before. As she walked, Emma thought about what new things she might learn today. When she arrived at the studio, she saw her new friends, Sarah and the others, already there. They waved at her, and she waved back. Emma felt happy knowing she wasn't just learning about art. She was also making friends who shared the same passion. Mrs. Clark greeted everyone with her usual bright smile. "Welcome back, artists. I hope you're all ready for another day of creativity," she said. Everyone took their seats, eager to begin. Emma sat down at the same spot as last time. The smell of fresh paint and the sight of blank canvases filled the room. There was a buzz of excitement in the air. Today, Mrs. Clark began, "We are going to try something new." Last week, we focused on painting things that make us happy. This week, I want you to think about how to tell a story with your painting. Art is not just about what we see. It's also about what we feel and what we want to say to others. Think of your painting as a way to share a message with the world. Emma listened carefully. She had never thought about painting as a way to tell a story. It made her think about how powerful art could be. She looked at the blank canvas in front of her, wondering what kind of story she wanted to tell. Mrs. Clark continued, "Before we start, let me show you some examples." She brought out several paintings and placed them on easels at the front of the room. One painting showed a stormy sea with a small boat struggling in the waves. Another showed a family sitting together by the fire, warm and happy, while outside, snow was falling. Each painting was full of emotions. "These paintings are stories," Mrs. Clark explained. "The one with the stormy sea tells a story of challenge and survival. The family by the fire shows love and comfort in a cold world. Every brush stroke, every color choice adds to the story." Emma felt inspired. She loved stories, and the idea of telling one with her painting excited her. But what story would she tell? As she thought, memories of her childhood came to her mind. She remembered her family going on trips to the countryside, walking through fields of wildflowers, and climbing hills to see the sunset. One memory stood out to her. She remembered a time when she and her family got caught in a sudden rainstorm. They had been hiking, enjoying the day, when the sky darkened and rain began to pour down. At first, they were worried, but then they laughed, running through the rain, soaked but happy. It was one of her favorite memories because it showed how even in difficult moments, there could be joy. Emma decided that this would be the story she would paint. She picked up her pencil and began sketching the outline of a family walking through a field, dark clouds above them, and rain falling. She added the hills in the background, with tall trees on one side and wild flowers on the other. She drew the family holding hands, smiling, even though the rain was pouring down on them. Once the sketch was done, Emma began to paint. She started with the sky, using dark gray and blue to show the storm. She added streaks of rain, falling in long lines from the clouds. Then she worked on the family, using bright colors for their clothes to show their happiness. She painted their faces with big smiles, their arms outstretched, as if they were enjoying the rain. As Emma painted, she felt herself reliving that memory. She could almost feel the cool rain on her skin and hear the laughter of her family as they ran through the fields. It made her happy to bring that memory to life on the canvas. Around her, the other students were busy with their own paintings. Sarah was painting a picture of her favorite beach again, but this time she was telling a story about a family enjoying a day by the sea, flying kites, and building sand castles. Another student, James, was painting a city street at night, with lights reflecting off the wet pavement after a rainstorm. Each painting had its own unique story, and it was amazing to see how different everyone's ideas were. Mrs. Clark walked around the room, stopping by each student to give advice and encouragement. When she came to Emma's table, she looked at the painting for a moment and then smiled. "This is wonderful, Emma," she said. "You've really captured the feeling of joy, even in the middle of a storm. I love how you've used bright colors for the family." I love how you've used bright colors for the family. It shows that they're happy, even though the weather is rough. Keep going, you're doing great. Emma felt a burst of pride at Mrs. Clark's words. She continued painting, adding more details to the field and the flowers. She used bright greens for the grass and soft purples and pinks for the flowers. The painting was starting to come together, and Emma could see the story she wanted to tell. After a couple of hours, Mrs. Clark called for another break. Emma stood up and stretched, feeling a bit tired, but very happy with her progress. She walked around the room to look at the other students' work. She was amazed at how everyone's paintings had grown and changed. Each one was full of life, color, and emotion. During the break, Emma and Sarah talked about their paintings. Sarah explained how she wanted her beach scene to show a perfect summer day, full of laughter and fun. Emma shared the story behind her painting, and Sarah smiled, saying how much she liked the idea of finding happiness even in the rain. When the break was over, everyone returned to their paintings. Emma focused on the final details. She painted the last few drops of rain, added shadows to the trees, and gave the wildflowers a little more brightness. Finally, after hours of work, her painting was complete. Mrs. Clark asked everyone to gather their paintings and bring them to the front of the room for a final sharing session. One by one, each student showed their work and explained the story behind it. Emma felt a bit nervous, but when it was her turn, she stood up proudly and held up her painting. "This is a memory from my childhood," Emma began. "My family and I were hiking when we got caught in a rainstorm. At first, we were worried, but then we started laughing and running through the rain. It was one of the happiest moments I can remember, even though the weather was bad. I wanted to show that even in hard times, there can still be joy. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone looked at Emma's painting. Then Mrs. Clark spoke. "That's a beautiful story, Emma," she said softly. "And you've told it so well with your painting. The colors, the expressions on the faces, the rain, it all comes together to show happiness in the middle of a storm. You've done an amazing job." The other students nodded and smiled, and Emma felt her heart swell with pride. She had done it. She had told her story through her art, and it had touched the people around her. As the workshop came to an end, Mrs. Clark thanked everyone for their hard work and creativity. She reminded them that art wasn't just about making something look pretty, it was about expressing feelings, sharing stories, and connecting with others. Emma knew she would never forget those words. On her way home, Emma felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The workshop had taught her so much, not just about painting, but about herself. She had grown as an artist, and she had shared a part of her heart with others. Emma knew that she would keep painting, keep telling stories, and keep finding joy in every brush stroke. As she walked through the streets, she smiled up at the sky, thankful for the rainy day that had inspired her story. She couldn't wait to see what the next art workshop would bring. This concludes the second part of the story, focusing on Emma's growth as an artist and how art can tell stories and bring people together.